They assumed it was just another stray dog resting in the snow. But as they approached, a chill ran through them, not from the cold, but from what they saw. The dog wasn't alone. Nestled tightly against her frozen body was something that made both men gasp in shock. That moment, in the heart of the frozen field, would alter their lives forever. It had started out as an ordinary walk on an extraordinarily cold afternoon. Jake pulled his coat tighter as the wind cut through his scarf like knives. The park was nearly deserted, save for a few snow-covered benches and the creaking of bare branches in the wind. Beside him, Liam kicked at a patch of snow with his boot. "I told you it was too cold to come out," Liam muttered, his breath forming clouds in the air. Jake gave a half smile. "Yeah, but staying cooped up in that apartment is driving me crazy." They walked in silence for a while, snow crunching beneath their boots, their cheeks stinging from the icy gusts. The whole world felt painted in white and gray, silent, still, and endless. It wasn't until they were near the edge of the field, past the line of skeletal trees, that Liam suddenly froze. "Wait, do you see that?" Jake followed his gaze to a lump in the snow about 20 feet ahead. From a distance, it looked like nothing more than a mound of frost-covered earth. But something was off. The shape was too smooth, too deliberate. "Is that a dog?" Jake said, already stepping forward. As they approached, the form became clearer. A large German shepherd, her thick coat iced over, her body unnaturally still. "She's not moving," Liam whispered, dropping to one knee. Jake crouched beside him, reaching out with a gloved hand. "Is she breathing?" Before he could answer, Liam gasped. "Jake, look." He pointed to the dog's side. Nestled tightly against the animal's chest was a smaller shape, tiny, human. "Oh my God," Jake said, the words catching in his throat. It was a child, a little girl, no older than 6 or 7, her arms wrapped around the dog's neck. Her face was pressed into the matted fur, and she wasn't moving. For a moment, neither man could speak. The scene before them was too surreal, too heartbreaking. The child was dressed in a light pink jacket, now soaked and stiff from the snow. Her mittens were gone, her fingers red and rigid. And yet she was tucked so closely against the German shepherd, as if the dog had been shielding her from the cold with the last of her strength. Jake snapped out of the trance first. "Check for a pulse," he said, already pulling off his scarf. Liam gently touched the girl's neck. "She's alive," and he breathed. "Faint, but there." Jake wrapped the scarf around her, scooping her carefully into his arms. Her body was limp, far too cold. "We need to get help. Now!" Liam stood and slid his arms beneath the dog. "She's still warm underneath," he said, shocked. "Barely, but she is." Jake fumbled for his phone with one hand and called emergency services. His voice trembled as he gave their location, trying not to break down. The dispatcher responded calmly but urgently. "Keep the girl warm. Help is on the way." Jake hung up and looked at Liam. "The clinic's on the next block, right?" Liam nodded. "I'll run." As Jake started back toward the park entrance with the child in his arms, Liam took off in the opposite direction, carrying the heavy, frost-covered dog against his chest. The snow made every step difficult, and the bitter wind whipped at their faces, but neither of them cared. Every second mattered. Jake glanced down at the girl, whose lips were blue, her eyelashes dusted with ice. He whispered, "Hold on. Just a little longer." And in the stillness of that frozen afternoon, as sirens wailed in the distance, Jake realized something. This wasn't just a rescue. It was the beginning of something much bigger. Something none of them could have predicted. The world became a blur of snow, sirens, and sheer panic. Jake ran through the snow-covered path, the little girl bundled tightly in his scarf and jacket. Her weight was feather-light, her skin icy even through the layers. He couldn't stop thinking about how still she was in his arms. Her chest rose and fell, barely. Each shallow breath felt like a fragile thread tethering her to life. Behind him, Liam struggled under the weight of the German shepherd. The dog's thick coat was frozen stiff, her body limp in his arms. But her eyes, those dark, loyal eyes, remained slightly open, as if even in her weakened state, she refused to look away from the child she had protected. Jake reached the park entrance just as flashing lights pierced the trees. The ambulance screeched to a stop on the snowy road, and two paramedics jumped out, their faces tightening as they saw the child. "We've got her!" Jake shouted. The medics rushed forward, expertly lifting the girl onto a stretcher. "Hypothermia, severe," one of them said, already checking her vitals. "We need to get her core temperature up immediately." "She was lying against a dog," Jake explained, breathless. "The dog kept her warm. That's the only reason she's alive." At that moment, Liam emerged from the trees, soaked and panting. He gently set the German Shepherd on the ground as a second team from an animal control van arrived. "She needs help too," Liam said, pointing to the dog. "She's alive, but barely." A woman in a blue coat knelt beside the shepherd. "We've called the nearest emergency vet clinic. I'll take her now." As Jake climbed into the back of the ambulance, he couldn't tear his eyes away from the little girl. Her face was pale, lips slightly parted, and her hand clutched the edge of the scarf he had wrapped around her. She looked so small on the stretcher, so fragile beneath the oxygen mask. The medic beside him nodded. "You did the right thing getting her out of there. A little longer and—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The ride to the hospital was a flurry of activity. The paramedics worked quickly, inserting warm IV fluids and wrapping the girl in thermal blankets. Jake sat silently, his hands trembling, watching them work. He had never felt so helpless. Meanwhile, at the vet clinic, Liam watched as the German Shepherd was lifted onto an examination table. The veterinarian, a woman named Dr. Hart, immediately began checking the dog's vitals. "She's severely malnourished and dangerously cold," she murmured. "But her heartbeat is steady. She's a fighter." "She saved that little girl's life," Liam said softly. Dr. Hart looked up. "She's a hero." Back at the hospital, hours passed like days. Jake paced the waiting room, unable to sit. The nurse who had taken the girl, whose name was still unknown, promised to update him as soon as possible. But every minute that ticked by felt heavier than the last. Finally, just as dawn was breaking outside the hospital window, a doctor approached. He looked tired, but calm. "She's stable," he said. Jake let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "She's going to be okay?" The doctor nodded. "Her body temperature was dangerously low, but she's young and strong. She's not awake yet, but she's improving." Jake sank into a chair, covering his face with his hands. "Did she say anything?" he asked. "She hasn't spoken yet. We're still trying to identify her." Jake nodded. "Please, let me know when she wakes up." Later that morning, Liam arrived at the hospital, snow still clinging to his boots. He looked exhausted, but his face lit up when Jake told him the girl was stable. "And the dog?" Jake asked. "She's going to make it," Liam said with a tired smile. "The vet says she was freezing and underfed, but somehow she held on. They're keeping her overnight." They sat in silence for a moment, the adrenaline finally fading, replaced by quiet awe. "That dog," Jake said softly. "She must have stayed curled around the girl all night." Liam nodded. "She kept her alive." They both looked toward the pediatric wing where the child slept, safe, warm, and breathing. Whatever had brought the girl and the dog together in that frozen field, it was more than luck. It was something unspoken, something powerful, and neither Jake nor Liam would ever forget it. The morning sun filtered weakly through the hospital windows, casting a soft golden light across the sterile white floor. Jake sat beside the little girl's hospital bed, watching her small chest rise and fall with steady breaths. Machines beeped quietly around her. Though she hadn't woken yet, the color had returned to her cheeks, and her fingers occasionally twitched. Tiny signs of life that gave Jake hope. He glanced at the scarf still loosely wrapped around her. It was damp and wrinkled, but he didn't dare remove it. Somehow it felt like a thread connecting them to the moment they found her, curled up in the snow with the dog that saved her life. Liam entered the room with 2 steaming cups of coffee. His face was drawn, eyes tired from lack of sleep. He handed one to Jake and nodded toward the bed. "Any change?" "She moved her hand a little," Jake said quietly. "Still hasn't opened her eyes." "I talked to the nurses," Liam said, sipping his coffee. "They're trying to find a match for her fingerprints. No one's come forward yet." Jake's brows furrowed. A girl that age doesn't just vanish without someone noticing. Liam nodded. "Exactly. That's why I think she has a family out there. Parents, someone, desperate to know where she is." They sat in silence for a while. listening to the quiet hum of the room. Then, as if summoned by their words, a soft knock came at the door. A police officer stepped inside. "You're the two who brought the girl in?" Jake and Liam stood quickly. "Yes," Jake replied. "I'm Officer Renee," she said kindly. "We've got an update. A family filed a missing persons report last night. A woman named Sarah Bennett, her 5-year-old daughter Emma, wandered away from their home during the snowstorm. It matches the girl's description. We just confirmed the ID." Jake felt a rush of relief. "So her name is Emma?" "Yes," the officer said. "Sarah's been searching all night. She's on her way here now." Liam exhaled slowly, shaking his head. Poor woman. She must have been terrified. About an hour later, they heard hurried footsteps in the hallway. A woman appeared in the doorway, her face pale, eyes swollen from crying, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. The moment she saw the girl in the bed, her breath caught in her throat. "Emma," she whispered. She rushed forward, collapsing beside the bed and gently brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. Her hands trembled and tears streamed down her face. "I'm here, baby. Mommy's here." Jake and Liam quietly stepped back, letting the mother have her moment. Neither of them spoke, not wanting to break the silence that now pulsed with overwhelming emotion. A soft murmur broke through the quiet. "Mommy." Emma's voice, thin and hoarse, cut through the air like a miracle. Sarah gasped and leaned in closer. "Emma, sweetheart." Emma's eyes fluttered open, confused at first. Then recognition dawned, and she reached up weakly toward her mother. "I was cold," she whispered. "But the dog, she stayed with me." Sarah clutched her daughter tightly, sobbing against her tiny frame. "I know, baby, I know." Jake and Liam exchanged a glance, their eyes misting. Every worry, every fear they'd carried since finding the girl melted into quiet gratitude. Emma was safe. She was home again. Later, after the nurses checked Emma's vitals and let her rest, Sarah approached Jake and Liam in the hallway. Her expression was a blend of exhaustion and overwhelming gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you both," she said, voice shaking. "If you hadn't found her—" Jake raised a hand. "We were just in the right place at the right time." Sarah shook her head. "Number, you were there when no one else was." "You saved my daughter," Liam added gently. "Actually, it was the dog who really saved her. She kept Emma warm, protected her." Sarah nodded, tears rising again. "Emma kept talking about the dog. She said it stayed with her the whole time." "She's at a clinic now," Liam said. "She was in bad shape, but she's going to pull through." Sarah looked toward the hospital room, where her daughter now slept peacefully. "Then I need to see her," she said. "That dog is more than just a stray. She's family now." Jake smiled. "We can take you to her." What began as a nightmare was now shifting into something entirely different. A story not just of survival, but of loyalty, love, and an unbreakable bond formed in the coldest of moments. And it was far from over. The animal clinic was quiet, nestled in the back corner of town like a secret haven. Snow still dusted the sidewalks outside, though it had stopped falling hours ago. Inside, the warmth of the heaters and the faint smell of antiseptic filled the air. Blizzard lay curled up on a thick blanket in her kennel, her breathing slow and steady. She was still weak, but her eyes had begun to regain their light. The staff had been taking turns feeding her warm broth, and for the first time in days she wagged her tail when someone approached. Jake and Liam stood just outside her kennel, watching as a young vet technician gently stroked her head. "She's a fighter," the tech said, smiling. "We weren't sure she'd make it the first night, but I think she knew that little girl needed her. She held on." Jake nodded slowly. "Yeah, she saved her life." That afternoon, Sarah and Emma arrived at the clinic. Emma clutched a small stuffed animal in one hand, a brown bear with a tattered ear, and her mother's hand in the other. Her face lit up as soon as she saw Jake and Liam waiting by the front desk. "Is she here?" Emma asked softly, her voice still raspy but filled with excitement. "She is," Liam replied gently. "She's doing much better." The vet tech led them to Blizzard's kennel. Emma's eyes widened when she saw the dog. Her steps grew slower, cautious, as if afraid the moment might disappear if she moved too quickly. "Blizzard," she whispered. At the sound of the voice, the dog slowly lifted her head. Her ears perked up. Then as Emma took another step closer, Blizzard tried to stand. Her legs shaky, body frail, but she managed to get up. Her tail thumped against the blanket. Emma dropped to her knees outside the kennel door, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You came back," she said. Blizzard pressed her nose to the glass gate, whimpering softly. Jake quickly unlatched the door, and before anyone could stop her, Emma gently wrapped her arms around the dog's neck. Blizzard licked her cheek, then rested her head on the girl's lap, her entire body relaxing in that familiar presence. Sarah crouched beside them, her hand over her mouth, eyes shimmering with emotion. "I didn't know dogs could love like this," she whispered. Jake smiled. "They can. Sometimes better than humans." As Blizzard lay beside Emma, Sarah looked at Jake and Liam with resolve in her eyes. "We want to adopt her," she said. "Emma has already named her." Liam raised a brow. "Named her?" Emma nodded quickly. "Blizzard, because she found me in the blizzard, and she didn't let me go." Sarah added, "She's the reason my daughter's alive. We can't just leave her behind." Jake looked at Liam, and both men smiled. "We'll help with the process." The next few days passed in a whirlwind of paperwork, phone calls, and home visits. The shelter staff were more than willing to approve the adoption after hearing the full story. The head volunteer even teared up when she watched a video clip of Blizzard and Emma curled up together on the floor of the clinic, the dog's head resting on Emma's lap as she softly read her a picture book. On the day Blizzard officially came home, Emma waited by the front door, bundled in her winter coat, clutching a new leash she had picked out herself, blue with silver snowflakes. She paced excitedly, glancing at the clock every few seconds. When Jake and Liam finally arrived with Blizzard in the back seat of their car, Emma burst out of the house before they even turned off the engine. "Careful!" Sarah called from the porch, laughing. But Emma was already there, helping open the door, holding her arms out as Blizzard jumped down, tail wagging furiously despite her thin frame. The dog leaned into Emma's hug, as if she'd never left her side. From that day forward, Blizzard was home. She had a warm bed in Emma's room, a spot under the kitchen table, and toys scattered around the living room. Sarah, who had never considered owning a dog before, found herself talking to Blizzard late at night while making tea, stroking her head as if it were second nature. Blizzard became more than just a pet. She became family. The bond that began in the freezing silence of a snow-covered field had only grown stronger. What had once seemed like a tragic beginning was turning into something rare and beautiful. Blizzard had saved Emma's life. Now Emma and her mother were determined to give Blizzard a life filled with love. Blizzard adapted to her new life more quickly than anyone expected. Within days, it was as if she had always belonged in Emma's home. Her once weak legs grew steadier. Her appetite returned, and that spark in her eyes, the one dulled by cold and hunger, began to shine again. Emma made sure of it. Every morning, even before brushing her teeth, Emma would kneel beside Blizzard's bed and whisper, "Good morning, hero." The German shepherd would stretch, yawn, and gently nuzzle the girl's face in return, her tail thudding softly against the rug. Their bond was visible in everything they did. When Emma sat at the table for breakfast, Blizzard would lie nearby, alert and calm. When Emma practiced reading aloud for school, Blizzard would listen patiently, occasionally tilting her head as if she understood every word. Sarah, watching from the doorway, often found herself wiping away a tear. She had never imagined that a dog could bring so much light into their home, or that one snowy night could so completely rewrite the course of their lives. One Saturday morning, Emma was invited to speak at her school's assembly. The theme was Heroes Among Us. Students were encouraged to talk about someone who had shown bravery or kindness. Emma didn't hesitate. She knew exactly who her hero was. That morning, she stood nervously at the front of the school auditorium, clutching a small note card in one hand and gripping her mother's hand with the other. When her name was called, she took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. Her voice trembled at first, but it grew stronger with every sentence. "Most heroes wear capes. Mine has fur." The audience smiled, listening intently. "A few weeks ago, I got lost in a snowstorm," Emma continued. "I was cold and I couldn't find my way home. But then Blizzard came. She stayed with me. She kept me warm. If it weren't for her, I wouldn't be standing here today. A hush fell over the crowd. Even the teachers looked moved. She didn't have a name then. She didn't even have a home. But she chose to protect me. And now I'll protect her. I make sure she's never cold. I give her all the hugs. She's my best friend. Applause erupted, echoing through the hall. Back home that evening, Sarah knelt beside Blizzard and whispered, "You changed everything." The dog gave a small grunt of approval and laid her head on Sarah's lap. For someone who once feared dogs, Sarah had grown to adore this one in particular. Jake and Liam continued to visit often. They brought treats, played with Blizzard in the backyard, and watched with quiet pride as Emma grew stronger, more confident, more joyful. "She's different now," Liam remarked one day, as he and Jake watched Emma teaching Blizzard to roll over in the snow-covered yard. "Braver." "Yeah," Jake replied. "So is Blizzard." One snowy evening, almost exactly a month after that fateful day, Emma asked to hang a photo in the hallway. It was a picture Jake had taken. Blizzard curled protectively around Emma in the animal clinic, both of them asleep. Sarah framed it and placed it on the wall, just beside the family portraits. "She's part of the family," Sarah said simply. Blizzard thrived in her new role. She guarded the house gently but alertly. She welcomed visitors with quiet friendliness, but never strayed far from Emma's side. At night, she curled up at the foot of the girl's bed, one ear always perked for danger. Sometimes Emma would wake from a bad dream, and before she could call out, Blizzard would already be there, her head resting gently on Emma's chest, her deep brown eyes offering quiet comfort. The winter slowly melted into spring. Snow gave way to green grass, and cold winds softened into warm breezes. But one thing remained unchanged: the love between a girl and her dog. What had begun as a tragedy had become the start of something beautiful. Blizzard had wandered into their lives from the cold and the dark. She had saved Emma's life without hesitation, without reason. She had asked for nothing in return, and in doing so, she had found everything she never knew she needed: a home, a family, and a place where she would never be alone again.